Imagine waking up on a warm summer morning nearly 2,000 years ago. The sunlight slips through the wooden shutters of your home. Somewhere nearby, a baker is pulling fresh loaves from a stone oven. The smell of warm bread drifts through the narrow streets. Merchants are already arranging fruit, wine, and olive oil in the busy marketplace. Children chase one another through the stone alleys. Blacksmiths strike glowing iron with steady rhythm. Dogs bark at passing carts. From elegant villas, the voices of wealthy Roman families echo across peaceful courtyards filled with fountains and flowers. To everyone living here, it feels like another ordinary day. No one is running. No one is afraid. No one is trying to leave. Because no one knows that before another sunrise, this entire city will disappear forever, buried beneath millions of tons of volcanic ash. Its streets, its homes, its temples, its people, frozen in time for nearly 17 centuries. This is the story of Pompeii. Not just the story of how it died, but how it lived. To understand the disaster, we must first understand the city itself. Pompeii stood on the Bay of Naples in southern Italy, where fertile volcanic soil made farming exceptionally productive. Vineyards stretched across gentle hills. Olive groves flourished beneath the Mediterranean sun. Merchants arrived daily from across the Roman world, bringing spices from the east, fine pottery from Greece, marble from distant quarries, and luxurious fabrics that traveled thousands of miles before reaching the city's markets. With a population likely between 10 and 20,000 people, Pompeii was neither Rome's largest city nor its most politically important. Yet it was prosperous, comfortable, beautiful. Wide stone streets crisscrossed the city. Fresh water flowed through aqueducts into public fountains. Elegant bathhouses welcomed citizens throughout the day. Colorful frescoes covered the walls of wealthy homes. Street vendors called out to customers. Musicians entertained crowds during festivals. The amphitheater echoed with cheers as spectators gathered to watch gladiators and theatrical performances. Life followed familiar routines. Bakers rose before dawn. Fishermen launched their boats into the calm waters of the bay. Artisans opened workshops filled with the sounds of carving, weaving, and hammering. Children attended lessons or helped their families with daily work. To its residents, Pompeii felt permanent, safe, stable. Like any thriving city, it seemed destined to continue for generations. Watching over all of this was a mountain. Its broad slopes dominated the horizon. Green forests covered much of its sides. Vineyards climbed its lower hills. To most people, it looked peaceful, almost comforting. The Romans called it Mount Vesuvius. Few suspected that it was an active volcano. In fact, many likely did not even understand what a volcano truly was. The mountain had slept for so long that it blended naturally into the landscape. Children grew up playing beneath its shadow. Farmers cultivated its fertile soil. Travelers admired its beauty. The silence inspired confidence. Yet deep beneath the mountain, far below the vineyards and forests, immense forces were quietly building. Molten rock shifted through hidden chambers. Pressure increased little by little. The earth itself was changing, completely unnoticed by the people above. There had been warnings. 17 years earlier, in AD 62, a powerful earthquake had struck the region. Buildings collapsed. Temples cracked. Walls crumbled. Many homes required years of repair. Ancient writers later described the destruction as severe. But earthquakes were not uncommon in southern Italy. Life continued. Repairs were made. Markets reopened. Families rebuilt. As the years passed, memories faded. Small tremors occasionally shook dishes from shelves or rattled doors. Most people barely paused. The ground had always seemed restless. Why should today be any different? And so, on the morning of August 24th, AD 79, according to the traditional dating preserved in ancient accounts, Though some historians continue to debate the exact season, Pompeii awoke just as it always had. The streets filled. The markets opened. The baker lit his oven. The fisherman untied his boat. Children laughed. Neighbors greeted one another. Above them, Mount Vesuvius remained silent. For now, the people of Pompeii had every reason to believe their city would endure. Generations had lived beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. Parents had raised children there. Grandparents had grown old watching the same mountain dominate the horizon. Its slopes were green and fertile. Wildflowers bloomed in spring. Vineyards climbed steadily toward the forests above. Nothing about it suggested catastrophe. To the Romans, fertile land was often considered a blessing from the gods. And nowhere seemed more blessed than the countryside surrounding Pompeii. The volcanic soil, though no one understood its origin, produced remarkably abundant harvests. Grapes ripened beneath the Mediterranean sun. Olive trees flourished. Fig orchards stretched across the rolling hills. Farmers harvested more than enough to feed their families and sell their goods throughout southern Italy. Merchants grew wealthy. Wine from the region became highly valued across the Roman world. Every successful harvest reinforced the same comforting belief. This was a fortunate place to live. Within the city walls, life reflected that prosperity. Elegant villas displayed colorful frescoes painted with scenes of gardens, myths, and distant landscapes. Marble columns surrounded peaceful courtyards. Small fountains cooled the summer air. Wealthy families entertained guests with elaborate dinners that sometimes lasted long into the evening. Servants carried silver trays filled with fresh bread, roasted fish, fruit, cheese, and wine. Beyond these luxurious homes lived artisans whose skill filled every street. Potters shaped elegant bowls from fine clay. Blacksmiths forged tools, locks, and decorative ironwork. Glassmakers transformed glowing sand into delicate vessels. Bakers prepared hundreds of loaves each morning using large stone mills powered by donkeys. The aroma drifted through the streets before sunrise, welcoming another ordinary day. Pompeii was also a city of entertainment. Its amphitheater could hold thousands of spectators. Crowds gathered to watch gladiatorial contests. Actors performed popular comedies and tragedies. Musicians played during festivals honoring the Roman gods. Public bathhouses served as social centers where citizens discussed business, politics, and local gossip. The baths were more than places to wash. They were where friendships formed. Deals were negotiated. News spread across the city. Even travelers arriving from distant provinces admired Pompeii. Its streets bustled with energy. Shops lined busy intersections. Stone stepping blocks allowed pedestrians to cross flooded streets after heavy rain without soaking their sandals. Public fountains supplied clean water throughout the neighborhoods. Everything suggested organization, stability, confidence. Yet beneath this comfortable routine, the earth was slowly changing. Deep below Mount Vesuvius, molten rock continued to rise through hidden chambers. Pressure built steadily inside the volcano. Each passing week added a little more. Then another. Then another. No one standing in Pompeii could hear it. No one could see it. The danger remained completely invisible. Even the occasional earthquakes failed to inspire lasting fear. Small tremors interrupted meals. Walls occasionally cracked. Statues shifted slightly upon their pedestals. People paused, looked around, then continued with their day. Earthquakes had become part of life. Children who had been born after the great earthquake of AD 62 considered them almost ordinary. A cup might fall from a shelf. A lamp might swing gently from the ceiling. The earth would settle once again. Nothing more. Modern volcanologists now understand that these tremors were warning signs. As magma forced its way upward beneath the volcano, the surrounding rock fractured under immense pressure. Every small earthquake was another signal from deep within the earth. But the people of Pompeii possessed no seismographs, no geological science, no emergency warning systems, no understanding of volcanic behavior. To them, the mountain remained peaceful. As summer drew toward its end, daily life continued exactly as it always had. Ships entered the harbor. Farmers returned from the fields. Children laughed in the streets. Families planned future weddings. Merchants ordered new shipments from across the empire. No one realized that many of those plans would never come to pass. Because somewhere beneath the quiet vineyards, beneath the elegant villas, and beneath the towering slopes of Mount Vesuvius, the pressure had almost reached its limit. The mountain had been silent for centuries. But silence can sometimes be the final warning before everything changes. The morning passed peacefully. The marketplace remained crowded. Merchants argued over prices. Fresh fish arrived from the Bay of Naples. The smell of bread still drifted from neighborhood bakeries. Nothing about the city suggested that history was quietly approaching. Yet beneath the streets, the earth was becoming increasingly restless. Throughout the day, small tremors continued to ripple beneath Pompeii. A clay cup slid from a wooden shelf and shattered across a kitchen floor. A bronze oil lamp swayed gently above a dining table. Dogs barked without obvious reason. Horses stamped nervously inside their stables. Most people barely noticed. Others simply shrugged. After all, the ground had shaken before. It always stopped. Life always returned to normal. No one imagined these tiny earthquakes were connected to the silent mountain overlooking their city. Today, scientists know exactly what was happening. Several kilometers beneath Mount Vesuvius, a vast chamber of molten rock had become dangerously overfilled. Superheated magma was forcing its way upward through ancient cracks deep inside the Earth's crust. As it moved, enormous pressure built against solid rock. Each tiny earthquake represented another fracture, another warning, another sign that the mountain was struggling to contain the forces growing beneath it. But none of this was visible. Above ground, the vineyards remained peaceful. Farmers continued harvesting grapes beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. Children laughed in shaded courtyards. Travelers entered the city through its gates without hesitation. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. Inside one elegant villa, servants prepared an afternoon meal. Fresh fruit rested in woven baskets. Wine cooled in ceramic jars. A cook stirred vegetables inside a bronze pot while bread baked inside a nearby oven. In another part of the city, blacksmiths hammered glowing iron into horseshoes and farming tools. The ringing sound echoed through the streets. Nearby, a painter carefully applied brilliant red pigment to the wall of a wealthy merchant's dining room. He expected to return the next morning to finish his work. He never would. Near the forum, politicians discussed local business. Shopkeepers counted coins. Travelers searched for inns before nightfall. Life moved with the comforting rhythm of routine. No one looked toward Mount Vesuvius with fear. Its broad slopes appeared calm beneath the afternoon sunlight. A few wisps of cloud drifted near the summit. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet hidden far below, gas dissolved within the rising magma. Steam, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. Pressure continued increasing inside the mountain like air trapped within a sealed vessel. The volcano had remained quiet for centuries. That long silence had allowed unimaginable amounts of energy to accumulate. Every passing hour made the situation more dangerous. Nature often gives warnings. The difficulty is recognizing them before it is too late. Birds sometimes leave an area before an earthquake. Animals occasionally sense vibrations too small for humans to notice. Ancient writers recorded strange behavior among livestock before natural disasters. Whether every story is accurate remains uncertain. But modern science confirms that many animals can detect subtle environmental changes beyond human perception. Perhaps some creatures living around Vesuvius sensed what people could not. Perhaps they became restless. Perhaps they fled. Or perhaps the mountain kept its secret until the very last moment. As evening approached, families gathered for supper. Children finished their games. Oil lamps illuminated homes one by one. Laughter drifted through open windows. Across Pompeii, thousands of people prepared for another peaceful night beneath the familiar shadow of Mount Vesuvius. None of them knew that the mountain was only hours away from awakening. Not with a gentle rumble, not with a small eruption, but with one of the most catastrophic volcanic explosions in all of recorded history. By tomorrow, the world they knew would no longer exist. Morning gave way to afternoon. The sun climbed high above the Bay of Naples. Heat shimmered across the stone streets of Pompeii. Merchants continued calling to customers. Farmers returned from nearby vineyards with baskets filled with ripe grapes. Children searched for shade beneath the city's arcades. Life remained wonderfully ordinary. Then, shortly after midday, someone looked toward Mount Vesuvius. At first, nothing seemed unusual. A dark cloud appeared above the summit. Perhaps smoke from a brush fire. Perhaps an unusually heavy cloud. People paused for only a moment before returning to their work. But within minutes, the cloud began to rise. Higher and higher still. It did not drift with the wind. Instead, it climbed almost straight into the sky. Ancient Roman writer Pliny the Younger, who witnessed the eruption from across the Bay of Naples, later described it as resembling a great Mediterranean pine tree. Its trunk rose upward with astonishing speed. Then, far above the mountain, it spread outward into enormous branches. Today, volcanologists recognize this as an eruption column, a towering mixture of volcanic ash, gas, shattered rock, and superheated steam shooting into the atmosphere with incredible force. Within moments, the peaceful mountain transformed into something terrifying. A deep roar echoed across the countryside, not like thunder, not like an earthquake, but like the earth itself tearing apart. Windows rattled. Birds exploded into the sky. Dogs began barking wildly. People poured into the streets. Every face turned toward the mountain. Many had never seen anything like it. Some stood frozen in disbelief. Others pointed toward the growing cloud. Questions spread faster than answers. What was happening? Was the mountain burning? Had the gods become angry? No one knew. The eruption intensified with astonishing speed. Millions of tons of ash and volcanic rock blasted upward every second. The column climbed more than 20 kilometers into the sky. The afternoon sunlight slowly disappeared behind a spreading canopy of ash. Small white fragments began falling from above. People reached out and caught them in their hands. They were light, warm, strange. Pieces of pumice stone. At first, children laughed as the tiny stones bounced across rooftops. Some adults watched with cautious fascination. Surely it would stop soon. Surely this was only a brief and unusual event. But it did not stop. The stones became larger, then heavier. Soon they fell continuously. Roofs echoed beneath the constant impact. Streets slowly disappeared beneath growing layers of pale volcanic rock. The air filled with dust. Breathing became difficult. Visibility began to fade. Inside homes, families hurried to close wooden shutters. Others gathered valuables, jewelry, important documents. Some believed remaining indoors offered the safest protection. Others made a different decision. They would leave immediately, soon. The roads leading out of Pompeii filled with frightened people. Parents carried young children. Servants loaded carts with supplies. Horses struggled against growing panic. Some families fled toward the sea. Others escaped into the countryside. Many hesitated. Perhaps they feared abandoning everything they owned. Perhaps elderly relatives could not travel. Perhaps they simply believed the eruption would soon end. History would remember those moments, because every minute mattered. Above them, Mount Vesuvius continued to roar. Its eruption column grew darker. Lightning flashed repeatedly within the towering cloud as volcanic particles collided high above the earth. Daylight faded into an eerie twilight. Ash drifted through every street. The city that had awakened to birdsong and sunshine only hours earlier now stood beneath an artificial night. No one in Pompeii realized it yet, but the falling ash was only the beginning. The volcano still held its deadliest weapon in reserve, and before the next sunrise, it would unleash it upon the city below. The eruption had now entered a terrifying new phase. The towering column above Mount Vesuvius continued to climb into the sky, its top spreading wider and wider until it blotted out the afternoon sun. Across Pompeii, the rain of pumice grew heavier. What had begun as small white stones had become relentless. They struck rooftops without pause, then countless more. The sound was unlike anything the city had ever heard. Constant pounding, an endless roar of falling rock. Every street slowly disappeared beneath an ever-deepening blanket of pumice. Walking became difficult. Each step sank into loose volcanic stone. Carts struggled to move. Horses stumbled. People slipped as they desperately searched for stable ground. Inside their homes, many families believed thick stone walls would protect them. Doors were barred. Windows were shuttered. Children were gathered close. Parents tried to remain calm. Surely this strange storm would soon pass. But outside, the weight on the rooftops continued to grow. Every hour added more stone. Ancient Roman houses had not been designed to withstand such unimaginable pressure. Wooden beams began to groan. Clay roof tiles shifted. Small cracks appeared in ceilings. Still, many people remained inside. Leaving now seemed even more dangerous. The streets were becoming almost impossible to navigate. Visibility had fallen dramatically. Ash filled the air like an endless snowstorm. Breathing became painful. Each breath carried tiny particles of volcanic glass and dust deep into the lungs. People wrapped pieces of cloth around their mouths and noses. Some soaked the fabric with water, hoping to filter the ash. Others carried pillows above their heads, attempting to shield themselves from the falling stones. No one knew which choice offered the best chance of survival. Across the Bay of Naples, one man watched these events unfold from a safer distance. His name was Pliny the Younger. Years later, he would write detailed letters describing everything he witnessed. Those letters remain the most important eyewitness account of the eruption. He described a sky turning black, ash falling across the countryside, terrified crowds running in every direction, lightning flashing repeatedly inside the enormous volcanic cloud. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, commanded the Roman fleet stationed nearby. Rather than fleeing, he made an extraordinary decision. He ordered ships to sail directly toward the disaster, partly out of scientific curiosity, but also to rescue people trapped along the coastline. It was an act of remarkable courage. As the fleet crossed the bay, ash began falling onto the decks. Hot stones crashed into the sea around them. The closer they sailed, the more dangerous the journey became. Meanwhile, inside Pompeii, the city continued disappearing beneath the storm. Some streets already lay buried beneath several feet of pumice. Doors could no longer open because volcanic stone had piled against them. People trapped inside houses suddenly realized they could not escape. Others climbed onto rooftops, believing higher ground might save them. Instead, the roofs themselves became deadly. Hour after hour, the weight increased. Then, without warning, one roof collapsed. Then another. Then another. The sound of breaking timber echoed through the darkness. Entire rooms vanished beneath falling beams and heavy stone. Families who had survived the eruption itself now faced another danger. The buildings around them were beginning to fail. Far above the city, the eruption column had become unstable. Something catastrophic was about to happen. When it did, everything would change again. And for thousands still trapped inside Pompeii, time was running out. For hours, Mount Vesuvius had poured ash and pumice onto the city below. By now, Pompeii no longer looked like the thriving Roman city it had been that morning. Its bright streets had vanished beneath layers of volcanic stone. Its elegant gardens had disappeared beneath gray ash. Its rooftops sagged under crushing weight. And still, the eruption continued. The afternoon sky grew darker with every passing hour. What should have been bright Mediterranean sunlight slowly faded into an eerie twilight. Then, into near complete darkness. It was as though night had arrived long before its time. People lit oil lamps. Torches flickered through the streets. But their small flames barely pierced the thick clouds of ash swirling through the air. Many later described the darkness as deeper than any ordinary night. It was not simply the absence of sunlight. The ash itself blocked nearly every ray. The world became gray, then black. Breathing grew even more difficult. Every inhale carried fine volcanic particles into the lungs. Eyes burned. Throats became painfully dry. People coughed constantly. Some wrapped wet cloth around their faces. Others covered their mouths with pieces of clothing. None of it offered much protection. Families who had decided to flee now struggled to find the city gates. Landmarks had disappeared beneath ash. Buildings looked unfamiliar. Entire streets had become nearly impossible to recognize. The city itself seemed to be vanishing before their eyes. Panic spread rapidly. Parents shouted for missing children. Neighbors called each other's names through the darkness. Some became separated forever within only a few minutes. Outside the walls of Pompeii, the countryside fared little better. Fields vanished beneath falling pumice. Trees bent beneath growing layers of ash. Livestock wandered aimlessly, frightened by the endless roar coming from the mountain. Even the sea appeared disturbed. Strong earthquakes shook the coastline again and again. Ancient writers described ships struggling against unusually violent waters. Some believed the sea itself was retreating from the shore before surging back once more. Whether every account was completely accurate remains uncertain. But one fact is beyond doubt. The entire region had become a place of unimaginable chaos. Across the bay, Pliny the Elder continued his rescue mission. His ships fought through showers of hot ash and floating volcanic debris. The closer they approached the disaster, the more impossible rescue became. Visibility dropped dramatically. The air smelled strongly of sulfur. Hot stones crashed into the water around the Roman fleet. Even experienced sailors struggled to understand what they were witnessing. Nature had become completely unpredictable. Back in Pompeii, the ground continued trembling beneath every step. Walls cracked. Columns leaned dangerously. Statues toppled into the streets. Still, many people survived. Many continued searching for escape. Had the eruption ended at this stage, thousands might have lived. But deep inside Mount Vesuvius, the eruption column had reached its limit. Now, gravity was beginning to pull it back down. The towering pillar of ash and gas could no longer support its own weight. Its lower sections started to collapse. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Each collapse sent something unimaginably deadly racing down the slopes of the volcano. Not lava, something far worse. Pyroclastic flow, a superheated avalanche of ash, volcanic gas, and shattered rock moving faster than a galloping horse. Hotter than most ovens. Powerful enough to flatten buildings. Fast enough that almost no one could outrun it. The people of Pompeii could not yet see it. Hidden behind darkness and falling ash, death had begun its final descent from the mountain. And this time, there would be almost no escape. For nearly 18 hours, Mount Vesuvius had raged without mercy. Ash still drifted through the darkness. The streets of Pompeii lay buried beneath meters of volcanic stone. Many buildings had already collapsed. Those who remained alive were exhausted. They had survived earthquakes. They had survived the endless rain of pumice. They had survived a night that seemed as though it would never end. Some believed the worst had passed. They were wrong. High above the city, the eruption column continued collapsing. Each collapse unleashed a terrifying current unlike anything the Roman world had ever witnessed. A pyroclastic flow. Not molten lava. Not ordinary smoke. But a dense, fast-moving cloud of superheated ash, poisonous gases, and shattered volcanic rock. Modern scientists estimate that some of these flows raced down the slopes of Vesuvius at well over 100 kilometers per hour. Their temperatures reached several hundred degrees Celsius. Hot enough to ignite wood. Hot enough to melt soft metals. Hot enough to end human life almost instantly. No horse could outrun them. No cart could escape them. No city wall could stop them. The first pyroclastic surges swept across the nearby town of Herculaneum. There, many people had gathered near the shoreline, hoping ships would rescue them. For centuries, historians wondered what had become of those missing residents. The answer remained hidden until modern excavations uncovered hundreds of skeletons sheltered inside ancient boathouses. Families, children, soldiers, merchants. They had waited together, still believing rescue might come. Instead, the superheated cloud reached them first. Death came so quickly that many never had time to react. Pompeii, however, still stood several kilometers farther away. The city had been spared the earliest surges. As people could not see what had happened to Herculaneum, they remained trapped inside a darkness filled with falling ash. Some continued searching for loved ones. Others prayed. Many simply waited, hoping daylight would return. Then, the mountain unleashed another collapse. This surge was larger, faster, more powerful. It thundered down the slopes of Vesuvius, flattening trees and carrying an avalanche of burning ash across the countryside. As it approached Pompeii, the city never heard a warning. There was no trumpet. No messenger. No final announcement. Only a roaring sound growing louder with every heartbeat. Some survivors may have looked toward the mountain. If they did, they would have seen a massive black cloud racing directly toward them, rolling across the ground instead of rising into the sky. Within seconds, it entered the city. The temperature rose with terrifying speed. Air became impossible to breathe. The cloud forced its way through streets, homes, temples, and courtyards. It filled every open doorway, every window, every narrow alley. Those still outside had almost no chance to flee. Those hiding indoors discovered that walls offered little protection against a cloud that surrounded entire buildings. For many, death came within moments, not because they were buried alive, but because the scorching gases and ash overwhelmed the body almost instantly. Modern archaeological evidence has transformed our understanding of this moment. For many years, people believed most victims slowly suffocated beneath falling ash. Today, researchers know the reality was often far more sudden. The first deadly surges exposed people to extreme heat and toxic gases before thick deposits of ash eventually covered the city. As the hours passed, additional pyroclastic flows swept across Pompeii again and again. Each one buried the city more deeply. Homes disappeared beneath layers of ash. Columns vanished. Gardens vanished. The Forum vanished. Roads disappeared until nothing recognizable remained. By the following day, Pompeii no longer existed as a city. Where bustling streets had stood only yesterday, there now stretched an empty gray landscape. Silent, still, as though no one had ever lived there at all. Yet beneath that silent blanket of volcanic ash, an entire Roman world remained waiting, perfectly hidden, for nearly 1700 years. When the eruption finally ended, silence returned. The roaring mountain grew quiet. The earthquakes faded. The endless rain of ash stopped falling. For the first time in nearly 2 days, the region was still. But the world had changed forever. There was only a vast gray plain. No rooftops, no temples, no marketplaces, no gardens, no voices. The city had vanished beneath several meters of volcanic ash and pumice. If a traveler had passed through the region only weeks later, they might never have realized an entire Roman city rested beneath their feet. The roads leading into Pompeii disappeared. Fields surrounding the city were buried. Even the outlines of buildings slowly faded beneath drifting ash and winter rains. Those who survived searched desperately for missing family members. Some cautiously returned to the buried city, not to rebuild, but to recover what little they could. Ancient tunnels were dug into the ash. A few valuables were recovered. Coins, jewelry, statues, anything worth saving. But every journey into the buried city was dangerous. Collapsed buildings, hidden voids, unstable ash. Eventually, even these rescue attempts stopped. The Roman Empire faced other problems. Other cities demanded attention. Life moved on. Pompeii slowly disappeared from memory. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Grass began growing across the volcanic deposits. Trees slowly returned. Rain carved new paths through the hardened ash. Generations passed without knowing what lay beneath them. The children of survivors became grandparents. Their stories slowly changed. Some details were forgotten. Others became legends. People spoke of a city destroyed by fire from the heavens. Some believed the gods had delivered punishment. Others dismissed the old stories entirely. Without visible ruins, it became difficult to separate memory from myth. Even official records gradually faded into forgotten archives. Only a few written accounts survived. Among the most important were the letters written by Pliny the Younger. Decades after the eruption, he carefully described what he had witnessed from across the Bay of Naples. His detailed observations became one of history's greatest eyewitness records of a natural disaster. Ironically, his description would one day help scientists understand volcanic eruptions around the world. Today, eruptions like this are known as Plinian eruptions, named in honor of the man who recorded them nearly 2,000 years ago. Meanwhile, beneath the hardened ash, time had almost completely stopped. Wooden furniture remained inside homes. Paintings still decorated colorful walls. Loaves of bread sat inside abandoned ovens. Glass bottles rested on shelves. Coins remained inside purses. Even simple everyday objects, combs, cooking pots, children's toys, were left exactly where their owners had placed them. Unlike most ancient cities, Pompeii was never slowly abandoned. It was interrupted. One ordinary afternoon became its final afternoon. One ordinary evening became its final night. That terrible interruption would preserve an entire Roman city in astonishing detail. Not because anyone intended it, but because volcanic ash sealed it away from wind, rain, sunlight, and human activity. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii slept beneath the earth, hidden, silent, waiting for someone, someday, to find it again. For nearly 1,700 years, Pompeii remained hidden beneath the earth. Empires rose and fell. The Western Roman Empire collapsed. Medieval kingdoms spread across Europe. Castles replaced Roman villas. Languages changed. Religions transformed entire civilizations. Yet beneath the thick blanket of volcanic ash, Pompeii waited in complete silence. No one walked its streets. No one opened its doors. No one knew that beneath the vineyards and fields lay one of the greatest archaeological treasures in history. Occasionally, farmers digging foundations uncovered pieces of marble, a broken column, fragments of painted plaster, old coins. Most believed they belonged to some forgotten Roman ruin. No one imagined an entire city remained perfectly preserved below. Then, in the late 16th century, workers digging a canal accidentally broke into buried walls covered with ancient frescoes. The discovery was remarkable, but its true importance was not understood. The tunnel was abandoned. The city remained hidden. More than a century passed. Then, in 1748, everything changed. Under the rule of King Charles of Bourbon, organized excavations began near the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. First, the goal was not to understand history. It was to recover valuable treasures. Workers searched for statues, marble, jewelry, anything worthy of royal collections. As they dug deeper, something extraordinary appeared. Entire streets, standing walls, painted homes, temples, shops, public fountains. Unlike other ancient cities reduced to scattered ruins, Pompeii looked as though its people had left only yesterday. Doors still stood in their frames. Colorful frescoes covered dining rooms. Political campaign slogans remained painted across exterior walls. Even graffiti written by ordinary citizens could still be read. Some messages advertised gladiator games. Others declared love. Some simply joked with friends. For the first time in history, archaeologists were not studying kings alone. They were discovering ordinary people. The baker, the merchant, the blacksmith, the innkeeper, the child who had scribbled on a wall. Pompeii preserved everyday life in astonishing detail. Excavation methods gradually improved. Instead of removing only valuable objects, researchers began carefully recording entire buildings. Every street revealed another story. Loaves of bread remained inside ovens. Wine jars still stood where merchants had stored them. Cooking utensils rested beside ancient kitchens. Doctors' surgical instruments lay untouched inside clinics. Even wooden furniture left faint impressions inside hardened volcanic ash. Then came one of archaeology's most emotional discoveries. In the 19th century, Italian archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed mysterious empty spaces inside the hardened ash. Bodies had long since decomposed, but the ash surrounding them had hardened before the remains disappeared. It had preserved hollow cavities shaped exactly like the people who had once been there. Fiorelli had an extraordinary idea. He carefully poured liquid plaster into those empty spaces. When the surrounding ash was removed, human figures appeared, not skeletons, but detailed casts capturing the final moments of life. A mother protecting her child, a man covering his face, a family embracing one another, a dog still chained near a doorway. These were not statues. They were silent echoes of real people caught in one unimaginable moment nearly 2,000 years earlier. The discoveries shocked the world. Pompeii was no longer simply another ancient ruin. It had become a time capsule, a city where history had paused in a single terrible instant. And with every new excavation, the people of Pompeii began speaking once again. Not through words, but through the lives they had left behind. For centuries, the world remembered Pompeii because of the volcano. Today, historians remember Pompeii because of its people. The eruption preserved far more than buildings. Preserved lives. Walking through Pompeii today is unlike visiting almost any other ancient city. Most archaeological sites reveal monuments, broken columns, ruined temples. Pompeii reveals something different. It reveals ordinary mornings, ordinary conversations, ordinary dreams, but also by bakers, teachers, gardeners, children, and families who expected tomorrow to arrive just like every day before it. Inside one bakery, archaeologists discovered dozens of carbonized loaves of bread. Some still carried the baker's official stamp. They had been placed into the oven shortly before the eruption. No one ever returned to remove them. In another home, a meal remained unfinished. Cooking pots still rested upon the hearth. Furniture remained exactly where it had been left. Across the city, shops still displayed their counters. Small taverns still contained drinking cups. Public fountains continued marking the street corners where neighbors once gathered for fresh water. Perhaps the most surprising discoveries came not from wealthy villas, but from ordinary houses. Their walls were covered with paintings, bright reds, deep blues, rich yellows, scenes from mythology, landscapes, gardens, even simple decorative patterns. Pompeii was a city filled with color, far brighter than many people imagine today. Its streets also carried voices, not living voices, but written ones. Thousands of pieces of graffiti survive across the city. Some advertised gladiator games. Some promoted political candidates. Others expressed love, humor, friendship. One person proudly announced that he had won at dice. Another complained about bad wine. Some messages were playful, others deeply personal. Together, they reveal people who were remarkably familiar. They laughed, argued, celebrated, complained, fell in love, just as people do today. Archaeologists also uncovered medical instruments of astonishing sophistication. Bronze scalpels, forceps, needles, surgical tools carefully arranged inside physicians' homes. Roman medicine, though limited by modern standards, was far more advanced than many imagine. Elsewhere, jewelry remained inside wooden boxes. Silver mirrors rested upon dressing tables. Glass perfume bottles still contained traces of ancient fragrance. Coins lay scattered across floors where frightened families had dropped them while trying to escape. One particularly moving discovery involved a dog. Its plaster cast revealed an animal still chained within a courtyard. Unable to break free, the image became one of Pompeii's most powerful reminders that disasters do not distinguish between rich and poor, young and old, human and animal. Perhaps the greatest lesson Pompeii offers is not about volcanoes. It is about ordinary life. The people who lived there did not believe they were part of history. They simply woke each morning, went to work, prepared meals, made plans for the future, just as we do. None of them expected that future to end before the next sunrise. That realization gives Pompeii its extraordinary emotional power. Because beneath the ash, we do not simply find ancient Romans. We find ourselves, people living ordinary lives, completely unaware that history had already chosen that day to remember them forever. For centuries, people believed Pompeii had been destroyed simply because a volcano erupted. Today, scientists know the truth is far more complex. The destruction of Pompeii was not caused by a single event. It was a deadly chain of events. Each stage made the next even more dangerous. The eruption began deep beneath the earth. Several kilometers below Mount Vesuvius, molten rock, known as magma, had been slowly collecting inside underground chambers for hundreds of years. Magma is not simply liquid rock. It also contains enormous amounts of dissolved gases. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and many other volcanic gases trapped under immense pressure. As long as the magma remained deep underground, the pressure kept those gases locked inside. But when the magma began rising toward the surface, everything changed. The surrounding pressure decreased. The trapped gases suddenly expanded, much like opening a bottle of sparkling water after shaking it. Except, on a scale almost impossible to imagine, the expanding gases blasted the magma apart into billions of tiny fragments. Instead of flowing quietly as lava, the volcano exploded. The eruption column rose more than 30 kilometers into the atmosphere. Pumice, steam, volcanic gas, and shattered rock were launched high above southern Italy. For many hours, gravity could not overcome the force pushing the eruption upward. But eventually, the eruption column became too heavy, collapsed. When that happened, the deadliest phase began. The collapsing column generated pyroclastic density currents. Modern scientists use this term because these deadly clouds behave differently depending on their density. Some hug the ground as dense flows. Others race ahead as lighter surges. Both are extraordinarily dangerous.
Immagine a hurricane.
Now imagine that hurricane moving at incredible speed, filled with burning ash, poisonous gases, and air hot enough to ignite wood. That comes closer to describing what swept across Pompeii. Temperatures inside some pyroclastic currents may have exceeded 400 degrees Celsius. Some estimates suggest even higher temperatures closer to the volcano. These currents did not simply burn everything. They removed breathable oxygen, filled lungs with scorching ash, destroyed buildings. Lava, the image most people associate with volcanoes, played almost no role in Pompeii's destruction. In fact, many volcanic eruptions produce slow-moving lava that people can often escape. Pyroclastic currents are different. They are among the fastest and most destructive natural hazards on Earth. Even today, modern cities located near active volcanoes remain vulnerable to them. Scientists continue studying Pompeii because every new discovery improves our understanding of future volcanic disasters. Mount Vesuvius itself has not disappeared. It still rises above the Bay of Naples. It remains one of the world's most closely monitored volcanoes. Thousands of instruments now surround the mountain. Sensitive seismographs detect even the smallest earthquakes. GPS stations measure tiny movements of the ground. Gas sensors monitor changes beneath the volcano. Satellites observe the mountain from space. Every small change is carefully recorded. Because today, more than 3 million people live within the greater Naples region. An eruption similar to AD 79 would present one of the greatest emergency challenges in modern Europe. Fortunately, scientists now understand Vesuvius far better than the Romans ever could. Emergency evacuation plans exist. Continuous monitoring operates every day. Researchers from around the world study the volcano. No one can prevent another eruption. But knowledge offers something the people of Pompeii never possessed. Warning. Perhaps that is the greatest legacy left by the buried city. This tragedy has helped protect countless lives. Its silence has taught generations of scientists. And nearly 2,000 years later, the people of Pompeii continue saving lives, without ever knowing they would. Nearly 2,000 years have passed since Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii beneath volcanic ash. Empires have risen. Empires have fallen. Entire civilizations have disappeared. Yet Pompeii remains one of the most powerful windows into the ancient world ever discovered. This greatest gift is not the tragedy itself. It is the extraordinary opportunity to witness everyday Roman life with remarkable clarity. Unlike many ancient cities that slowly evolved over centuries, Pompeii was frozen within a single day. It preserved ordinary moments that history rarely records. The baker preparing tomorrow's bread. The merchant expecting another shipment. The artist finishing a colorful wall painting. The child leaving footprints across a courtyard. The family planning tomorrow's meal. None of them imagined they were living through their final ordinary day. That is why Pompeii continues to captivate millions of people every year. It reminds us that history is not made only by emperors. It is lived by ordinary people. Modern archaeologists continue uncovering new discoveries beneath the ancient city. Even today, large sections of Pompeii remain unexcavated. Researchers now proceed much more carefully than those who first uncovered the ruins centuries ago. Instead of digging as quickly as possible, They used lasers, ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, digital mapping, three-dimensional scanning, microscopic laboratory testing. Technology allows every discovery to reveal new information without destroying fragile evidence. Recent excavations have uncovered beautifully painted homes, well-preserved furniture, food remains, human DNA, animal remains, and remarkably detailed frescoes whose colors still appear vibrant after nearly 2 millennia. Every excavation adds another small piece to the story. Every discovery helps historians understand not only how Pompeii died, but how it truly lived. Pompeii has also transformed modern archaeology itself. Before its discovery, many excavations focused primarily on recovering beautiful treasures: gold, marble statues, jewelry, objects suitable for royal collections. Pompeii changed that philosophy. Archaeologists realized that broken pottery, simple cooking tools, wooden furniture, food scraps, even graffiti, could reveal just as much about ancient civilization as priceless treasures. Today, not simply valuable objects. This approach has influenced excavations around the world. Beyond science, Pompeii has inspired artists, writers, filmmakers, historians, and travelers for generations. The story appears in novels, paintings,
óperas,
museums, documentaries, and countless history books. Each generation returns to Pompeii asking new questions. What was daily life truly like? How did ordinary Romans think? What can their world teach us about our own? Perhaps the most remarkable lesson is how familiar their lives still feel. They celebrated birthdays, complained about politics, decorated their homes, argued with neighbors, loved their children, dreamed about the future. In so many ways, they were not so different from us. That recognition creates a powerful connection across 2,000 years. Pompeii reminds us that every ordinary day is precious, because no one knows which ordinary morning may quietly become part of history. As evening settles once again over the Bay of Naples, Mount Vesuvius still stands on the horizon, peaceful, silent, much as it appeared before the eruption. The slopes remain green. Its vineyards continue producing grapes. Life surrounds it once again. Yet beneath that familiar landscape, Pompeii still rests, not forgotten, but remembered, not merely as a city destroyed, but as one of humanity's greatest stories ever preserved by time itself. If there is one final lesson Pompeii leaves behind, it is this: nature never truly sleeps. Mount Vesuvius did not disappear after AD 79. It remained exactly where it had always been, watching over the Bay of Naples, silent once again. But silence is not the same as safety. Over the centuries, Vesuvius erupted many more times. Some eruptions were relatively small. Others devastated nearby towns and villages. In the year 1631, a violent eruption claimed thousands of lives. Ash darkened the skies. Entire communities were destroyed once again. History had repeated itself. And yet, people continued returning. Why? The answer is surprisingly simple. The same volcano capable of terrible destruction also creates extraordinarily fertile soil. Generation after generation, farmers planted vineyards along its slopes. Olive trees flourished. Fruit orchards expanded. Families rebuilt homes where earlier ones had vanished. The mountain offered danger, but it also offered life. Even today, millions of people live within sight of Mount Vesuvius. From the summit, you can look across the sparkling Bay of Naples. Fishing boats drift across blue water. Children play in parks. Tourists fill cafes and narrow streets. Life continues much as it always has. It is easy to forget what happened here, until you visit Pompeii. Walking through its stone streets, you begin noticing small details. will ruts carved into ancient roads, stepping stones placed above rainwater, tiny shrines built into street corners, colorful paintings that somehow survived nearly 2,000 years. You realize these were never ruins built for tourists. They were homes. Someone swept these floors every morning. Someone opened these shop doors. Someone waited for customers beside these counters. Someone laughed here. Someone celebrated birthdays here. Someone dreamed about tomorrow here. Then, tomorrow never came. Perhaps that is why Pompeii affects visitors so deeply. It does not feel like an ancient civilization separated from us by thousands of years. The worries of paying bills, preparing meals, raising children, planning holidays, building homes, hoping for a better future. These are timeless human experiences. Pompeii reminds us that every generation believes tomorrow is guaranteed. History quietly teaches otherwise. Today, scientists monitor Mount Vesuvius every hour of every day. Sensitive instruments record the smallest earthquake. Chemical sensors analyze volcanic gases escaping from deep underground. Satellites measure movements of the mountain too small for human eyes to detect. Emergency planners continuously update evacuation plans. Entire scientific teams dedicate their careers to understanding one mountain. Not because another eruption is certain tomorrow, but because preparation saves lives. Knowledge, perhaps more than anything else, separates our world from the world of Pompeii. The people of AD 79 had courage. They had intelligence. They had thriving cities. But they lacked one thing: understanding. Today, thanks to geology, archaeology, and nearly 2,000 years of scientific discovery, we understand far more than they ever could. And much of that understanding came directly from the city they left behind. Pompeii's greatest contribution to humanity did not happen while its people were alive. It happened after them. As the sun sets over the Bay of Naples today, its golden light once again touches the stones of Pompeii. The streets are quiet now. No merchants call from their shops. No children race through the narrow alleys. No blacksmith's hammer echoes across the forum. Only the footsteps of visitors disturb the silence. Nearly 2,000 years have passed. Yet somehow, the city still feels alive. Walk through its streets slowly enough, and your imagination begins to fill the silence. You can almost hear the distant laughter from a family gathering, the clatter of wooden wagon wheels crossing the stone roads, the cheerful voices of merchants advertising fresh bread and sweet wine, the splash of water flowing from public fountains. For a brief moment, it no longer feels like a ruin. It feels like a city waiting for its people to return. That is Pompeii's greatest miracle. Not that it survived, but that it remembers. Every doorway, every staircase, every faded painting, every worn stone carries the memory of ordinary lives. History often celebrates emperors, generals, conquerors. Their victories fill books. Their names appear on monuments. But Pompeii tells a different story. It reminds us that civilizations are built not only by rulers, but by ordinary people. The baker who rose before dawn, the teacher guiding curious children, the mason repairing cracked walls, the fisherman returning home before sunset, the mother preparing the evening meal, the father dreaming of tomorrow. History belongs to them as well. Perhaps that is why Pompeii continues to move millions of people every year. Because when we look closely, we do not simply see ancient Romans. We recognize ourselves, our routines, our ambitions, our hopes, our certainty that tomorrow will arrive. The people of Pompeii never imagined they were living through the final ordinary day of their lives. That morning, everything seemed normal. The sky was blue. The markets were open. Children laughed in the streets. Nothing suggested that history was only hours away. It is a quiet reminder that the most important moments in life rarely announce themselves in advance. They begin as ordinary mornings, and only later become extraordinary memories. Mount Vesuvius still watches over the Bay of Naples. It remains one of the most carefully monitored volcanoes on Earth. Scientists continue studying every tremor, every gas emission, every subtle movement beneath the mountain. But because understanding nature gives humanity its greatest chance to prepare. That knowledge, built partly upon the lessons preserved by Pompeii, may one day save countless lives. The city continues protecting people even now. Its tragedy became humanity's teacher. The silence became science. Its destruction became knowledge, though they never knew it, left behind one of history's greatest gifts. So the next time you walk through an ordinary morning, hear birds singing outside your window, share breakfast with family, or watch sunlight spill across your home, take a moment to notice it, because history is not only made during great battles or dramatic disasters. History is made in ordinary moments, the moments we often overlook. Pompeii reminds us to treasure them, because every ordinary day is, in its own quiet way, an extraordinary gift. Thank you for joining this journey through one of history's most unforgettable stories. And as the shadows lengthen over the silent streets of Pompeii, the city rests once more beneath the warm Italian sky, not forgotten, but remembered, forever.